So excited to have our celebrity guest on today. Now, this person, of course, was the very first person to hit 1 million views on YouTube. This guest I'm having on today is the first person ever to get 1 million thumbs up, 1 million likes, the first person that really helped blow up YouTube in a big way. He's a good friend of mine. He's a nationally sought after speaker. He's an amazing guy, and he's going to share lots of insights about the way social media is helping change the world that we live in and the brands and the products and the services that we want to share. Get ready. It's going to be an amazing interview. Welcome to the next 24 hours, where I'm going to give you real information you can really use to transform your life and work one day at a time. I'll be your host, Curtis Zimmerman. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the next 24 hours. I'm Curtis. I will be your host, and I'm very excited today because we have a good friend of mine and someone that's about to be a very good friend of yours. His name is Judson Laipply, and Judson is one of those people that is so famous that I can go through the list of things he's appeared on, the shows he's been on, Oprah and Good Morning America. And I mean, you know, when you're on Delta Airlines and you're sitting there and they go through that little thing where they tell you about the safety and it's a safety video. He's been on those videos featured. Recently, he was on Rolling Stone magazine where they're talking about this person that blew up something, and he was the very first person to really launch this platform. He's going to tell us about it this morning. Let's welcome Judson to the show. Good morning, Judson. How you doing today, my friend?
I am living the dream, Curtis. Always living the dream.
I know that's right. So I kind of did a teaser. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and this little platform you helped launch? I don't know, it's been about 13, 14 years ago now.
I wish I could say that it was successful because of me. However, I think it was one of those things where I was very fortunate, combination of taking a risk, hard work, and then being in the right place at the right time. You know, a lot of times in life, we know the formulas, but it also becomes very beneficial sometimes to just get a little bit lucky. And I think I was very fortunate to have been really lucky. So way back in the day, in my first 5 years of working as a professional speaker, a mentor had given me a great piece of advice that said, you got to do something different that not everybody else does. People will kind of remember if they saw you or not, but if you have one thing that you do that is unique or nobody else does, that might be the one thing. They can call it a bit or a shtick or whatever you want to call it. And I was talking a lot about change. I was talking a lot about how everything changes and we need to get out of our own heads about whether those changes are good or bad and just graduate to the acceptance and the surrender of everything changes. And so I wanted to do something to demonstrate how everything changes. And long story short, came up with this idea for a dance routine about all of the different songs that have very specific dances. That when you hear that song, that's the dance that everybody wants to do. And so I played around with it a little bit and I started working with it. And I came up with this thing called the evolution of dance. And I first performed it in Delaware, Ohio in the spring of 2000. Fast forward 6 years later, I uploaded a 6-minute evolution of dance to a little site at the time called YouTube so I could get an embedding code to put it into my MySpace profile. So that will tell you what was going on at that point.
My MySpace profile.
Yeah, and that was the reason. You know, YouTube, when you talk about user interface on the internet and some of those earlier days back in the mid 2000s, the reason that I chose YouTube was because its user interface was so much easier than the other sites. There were multiple sites at the time that hosted video, but YouTube's, it's kind of like Amazon and one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest things Amazon ever did was their one-click buy button. It made things so much easier for people. And it was the same thing with YouTube. They made it so easy to upload a video, copy an embedding code, and paste it into another location on the internet to have that video play. And then over the course of the next several weeks, unbeknownst to me at the time, people started passing around the link to my video and it started gaining some viralness. And then boom, one day I got a whole bunch of emails from YouTube and I kind of was like, whoa, what's going on? Went on to my page on YouTube, looked, and I had 30,000 views. And I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I might get a speaking gig out of this. And then over the course of that weekend, it went from 30,000 to 90,000 the next day to 500,000 a couple of days later. And then over the
Wow.
course of the next 6 months, it went from that 30,000 to 70 million. And it was the first viral video on YouTube. And it became kind of a talking point as well, because at that point, YouTube was just starting to gain popularity in kind of the general audience. When my video was first posted, the average age of a YouTube watcher was 12. So it was really used by the younger generation. And now the average age is, I want to say, like 42, pretty much the exact medium age of the entire population of the planet. And then for the next 3 years, I had the most watched video on YouTube, the most liked video on YouTube. I was the first video to ever hit 100 million views and the first video to ever get 1 million likes. And then eventually, when Justin Bieber hit puberty, I lost the #1 most watched video spot.
Oh, that is great. And now how many views would you say you have now? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so the actual count on the video itself sits at about 305 million, but the total view is probably around 500 million. In the early days of YouTube, people could actually take your video, strip it off of your page, and then repost it. And then eventually, when YouTube's algorithm and software got a little bit better, they were able to find all those videos that people had reposted and removed them, but then it didn't add that count back to the original video, if that makes sense. So there were a couple people that reposted it that would get 30, 40, 50 million views, but then eventually that video got taken down.
Got it. Okay. So, wow, I had to share that story. It's an amazing story. You're an amazing guy. And riding the wave of all of that has been so much fun to watch over the years. And one thing I would say is I'd love to go back a little bit further and talk about how you and I first met. And we basically started our speaking career on the same day with a friend of ours, Dave Coleman. Dave Coleman is known as the dating doctor. I think he's written 5 or 6 books on relationships and dating. He's an amazing guy and one of the biggest, if not the biggest speaker in the college market. And Dave was so booked and so busy that he decided he needed to bring some people in to go and do his, what was it called? Date Smart? What was the name of the?
Creative dating.
Creative dating. So that was his speech in his program he did. And he wanted to bring some other people in to do that speech for him. And Judson was a rock star on a college campus that he met and said, hey, come to this and maybe you can be one of my speakers. I showed up basically to carry people's bags in because Dave didn't know I wanted to be a speaker, and I was doing video and just kind of hanging out at this conference. And that's where Judson and I first met. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that like it was yesterday almost. Cincinnati, Ohio. I was so excited. I had met Dave when I was a student. I served on a national board, and Dave was still working at Xavier University at the time and had just started speaking a little bit. And so I actually brought him to my campus when I was a sophomore and paid him to come do some programs. And they went great. And we stayed in touch a little bit, but then I lost touch. And then when I was really looking into doing it as a career, I sat him down at a conference and I said, hey, could you give me an hour of your time so I could talk and learn a little bit more about what this is? And he just looked at it. And if anybody out there listening knows Dave Coleman, one of his attributes is he gets really excited sometimes. And he was just like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You want to do this? I'm getting ready to start an agency, and just went off and invited me to come down. And it was like, I want to say it was the next weekend. So it was really just serendipitous all the way around because it wasn't a long time out. He just was like, oh my gosh, I'm looking for people. Come to Cincinnati next weekend.
And my belief is you're one of the few that ever actually did the program, and you did it lots of times.
Yeah, I think of all the people that were there at that meeting, I know one other person who still does some speaking, but works a full-time job. But you and I are the only ones that, and I think I remember this early on, Curtis, you and I had a discussion about too often in life, people look for somebody else to make it happen for them. And you and I both, I think probably was like a year or two after we had first met when we were talking, and we both said, we're going to make this happen for us, no matter what. If we can find somebody that can help us and assist us, we will definitely take that. But we were not looking to Dave to hand us a speaking career, which is, I think, what a lot of other people were who happened to be attending that particular meeting.
Wow, I think what you just said is so valuable to everyone that's listening. I'd love your thoughts on that. And I know you're very involved with NSA, which is a National Speakers Association. You've been honored as one of, 6% of all the speakers on the planet to get your CSP, which is a huge honor. And so you're very involved with that community. Will you talk a little bit about what you just said? Because I think it's so valuable for anyone that's looking to present. Most executives have to present in a boardroom at a minimum, let alone their big annual conference. And the chops to be able to do that and take ownership of it is huge. So tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on what you just said. I think it's so important.
Well, I think it's part of what's great about the world we live in now is you can get most anything you need pretty quick from a physical standpoint. With Amazon and Walmart and all of these other companies allowing, in some areas, 1 hour delivery. You can get groceries delivered within an hour, a lot of places. And that puts us in a mindset that why can't we have everything else pretty much instantaneously? But there are some things that no matter how much you want it, it's not going to happen immediately. And professional speaking as a career and being a good speaker, period, is something that takes hard work. Takes a lot of practice. One of the things I've always loved about you and your presentations is the idea of once you getting something to performance level and knowing that you've got to put in the work in order to be able to do something well. And in any career, whether you're in a C-level suite, whether you're working inside a company, yes, it's great to find mentors along the way, but no one will ever care about your career, your success, or your happiness more than you, which means you should be the one that has the most responsibility for it.
Amen. Absolutely. Amen. And, the big challenge a lot of the people we're speaking to right now that are listening and the people I know you speak to is so funny because it's all the way back to where you started, and that is change. And change in the marketplace, change at work, change in the world is happening so fast now that, in my opinion, your messaging is more relevant than ever. So tell me a little bit about how your message through the years has changed, the evolution of dance. Well, the evolution of Judson's message has also changed. And how do you help people with change management? Now, last year I spoke at something called the Change Management Conference. So there's actually a new room that is down the hall from people that are listening right now that has somebody, and their whole job is just dealing with change because so many people are having struggles with it. So talk to us a little bit about, give us some of your impact, 5 things about change and the way people that are listening can hopefully get through their day with the change they're dealing with.
Sure. And, change management, I think, is one of those interesting titles because truth is you're not managing change. You're managing the effects of change. So every change that ever happens in anybody's life falls into one of 2 categories. Changes that you have influence and input and control over, and changes that you don't. And what happens, I think, is we spend more time focused in on the ones that we don't have any control over, and not enough time focused in on the ones that we do have influence and control over. And especially within an organization, people who are, one of my new tenets or one of the things that I'm saying now is we need people to stop managing change and people to start leading evolution. Because sometimes what happens is inside organizations, people get bored. We've got jobs, and if there's nothing really crazy going on or we're not in the middle of a huge project, sometimes people are like, well, maybe we need to mix things up a little bit. And they create work for themselves by creating a change that isn't necessarily moving the organization forward. It's not better serving their customers. It's not better managing their efficiency. It's not making their quality better. They're just doing something different because they don't know what else to do.
Well, I find that so true, and also true with a lot of brands. So we do a lot of work with different brands, and sometimes if you work at P&G, every 4 years they move you to a new brand, and of course you want to leave your mark. So even though the brand's selling well and it's amazing and doesn't need any changes, you just have to manage it. It doesn't matter. They want to come in and put a different handle on the container or change the color or put a new logo on it, and that can be one of the worst things you can do to that brand because it already has its own market, its own brand appeal. So to your point, change for change's sake is a waste of time. Change in managing so you have a bigger reach, wow, in your relationships at work or with your self-development, it's like working out. I know you're a big workout guy. We don't just do our legs every day, but we do our legs and then we do our abs and then we do our shoulders because it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can look at a lot of examples of brands who change something that their consumers, I mean, with, Coke probably being the biggest example when they went with the new Coke way back in the day that didn't go well, even though in blind taste tests, when people didn't know that it was new, they liked it better than the previous one. But when they told people it was new, because again, we know this, people don't like change, or people don't like the struggles or the extra work that change usually brings. And I think that's one of the other hard things is most people don't mind change itself as long as it's not going to affect my life. But it's kind of that level of, we kind of just only look at what's going on around us immediately. Yeah, that'd be great. That's awesome. Go do that. Okay, perfect. Oh, wait, now this means more work for me. Well, then I don't like that change because it's more work for me. And sometimes we've got to get past that and recognize that maybe it will be a struggle for a time period, but most of the things that we become strong with in life were things that we struggled with.
Yes, I totally agree. I also think that there's a lot of change happening, obviously, now in marketing and with social media. And you being one of the most downloaded people on the planet, I'm sure you've had a lot of different people come to you and say, hey, so I want to do a viral video. Give me the secret sauce. Hey, we want to do product placement with these, TikTok stars. And we want to. So what advice do you have, if any, about just social media and where it's going and where you see it leading? So I have my daughter. She's on TikTok constantly. And it's very interesting how that has gone to TikTok is like, what is it? 30 seconds, 1 minute tops. What's that doing to our attention span? I don't know. I don't have an opinion. I'm wondering what yours is.
Social media is one of the greatest, the internet in general is one of the greatest things that's ever happened to us as a globe. And it's also possibly one of the worst things that ever happened to us as a globe. When it comes to marketing, the greatest advantage that you've got with social media and all of the different sites and all of the different places is the ability to target an already interested consumer. With Facebook ads and Instagram ads and TikTok ads and all the things, they have so much data on everybody. So I think there's a benefit there from a marketing standpoint. The hardest thing, though, is when you're targeting such a small market, figuring out a way to attract new consumers, people who have never heard of your product, who have no idea what your company does, anything like that. That's what makes it much more difficult. And that's where social media can also be a real benefit when, from a brand standpoint, you're managing your own social media channels. So I think the biggest things especially with TikTok, because a lot of brands are seeing that kids are flocking to TikTok and they want to figure out a way. All of my friends who work in digital media and all the things that I've learned and all the things that I've observed is you pick a couple of lanes that best align with your brand, and you really stay in those lanes. You work those lanes. If you're not going to put the energy, effort, and resources into your brand's line or your brand's channel on TikTok, then don't waste your time. Because if we talk about channels, doing a channel bad is probably worse than not having a channel at all.
Tell us what you mean by channel. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I say channel, I'm thinking, so Instagram is a channel, or you can call it platform, or you can call it service.
Okay.
You've got Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Those are kind of the big five where people are spending the vast majority of their time. And if you're a brand, especially if you're not a big brand, you might not have a 5-person team for social media. You might only have one person that's running all of your social media, and figuring out how to utilize all 5 of those different channels or all 5 of those different platforms, that's a lot of work.
Yes.
So the things that I think that I've learned that kind of go across all platforms when it comes to brands themselves, whether you're a one-person brand, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar brand, whether you're a mid-sized brand, consistency will most likely out-trump quality in the long run. You always want to have quality, but sometimes people get so worried about thinking, oh, we got to spend a week writing and producing and editing a 60-second video. When truth is, as long as you're putting out a 60-second video every Tuesday on the same time frame or every other day, whatever your strategy is, that consistency is more important than that quality. Another big aspect of it is authenticity. The nice thing about all of these different channels is you don't have to have an overly produced piece of content anymore. People are fine with, most TikTok videos are not high quality. They are filmed on a phone and then uploaded almost immediately.
Right. So it's more about sharing your personality, more about sharing you some insight into who you are, maybe a dance. I've watched some of those.
Yeah. Lots of dances.
Right. Lots and lots of dances. The evolution of dance. I'm with it. So if we go now to the smaller, I have 3 teenagers at home, and the impact of them having that device in their hand. I know you've been to a million conferences, and they kind of group you in with those experts with the different demographics and the way the social media is having an impact, and the way suicide's spiking with young people, second cause of death now. So any thoughts or insights for our listeners on where you think it's headed? And as a parent, should we all be freaking out, or do we need to relax a little? And you just called me a boomer earlier. So, just relax, boomer. I get it. What's your take?
I think there's definitely, for the parents out there, you definitely have to be a little bit more involved in knowing exactly where your children are spending their time and which sites they're visiting, which platforms they're spending a lot of time on. Is it the end of the world? I don't believe it's the end of the world. I think, like anything, when we're young, actually not even when we're young, period, in life, we all seek validity. We all want to feel validated. Some of us feel validated by our significant other, and that's enough. Some of us feel validated by our family, and that's enough. And some of us, I enjoy doing what I do in part because we get to be in front of large audiences speaking who like us. And then when we get done, they applaud for us. And that's a level of validation that is intoxicating and can become somewhat addictive. When the day happens that I stop speaking, I don't know if I'll really miss all of that validation. And so for the younger generation, their validation has been brought to a data point with likes. And I think if you're a parent, being conscious of that and finding other ways to validate your children and make sure that they feel loved and validated as a human being isn't going to replace those likes, but can help navigate through the emotional and the social and the mental aspects of when they upload a video onto Instagram or a picture onto Instagram and they only get 3 likes. Instagram has toyed with the idea of removing the like button from public display, which means, and I don't know where they're at with it. I know they've been toying with it for a while, and they've done it in some other countries, because science has shown and studies have shown that it's that like factor, that if somebody likes something that you do, you get a little, you get a little jolt of serotonin and dopamine and things like that. But if they don't like it, you get some of the same effects that you would get if you're depressed. And so if you're doing that on a regular basis, you're spiking your serotonin levels, you're spiking your dopamine levels, or you're not, because people aren't liking as much. And I think the other aspect of it, and this is why it's important to stay on top and be communicating with your kids and making sure that you're paying attention, is when we were growing up, I'm turning 44 in a couple of weeks. When we were growing up, if somebody didn't like us, only a few people knew that. We might not even know that. But now if somebody doesn't like somebody, they tell everybody they know, and they let you know on a digital platform of some sort that they don't like you. And I think that's hard for any human being, let alone for young human beings, to have to navigate through.
Right. I could not agree more. And I think that is, as a parent, to your point, letting them have likes as a human being and letting them know what unconditional love looks like, I think is validation for them, but also for us to say, every single thing you do, you're not going to get a trophy for. Some videos you put up, aren't going to be a hit, and others may be, and you don't know why. So taking that on our last thing I wanted to chat with you about, and that is for you as a speaker, if there is somebody else that's listening to this podcast right now, and they're thinking about maybe wanting to become a speaker, is there any, 5, 6 tips, tricks, advice you would give about living on the road? About, it's that whole thing that both of our mentors, Dr. Will Keim, used to tell me. People would always come up and say, "Oh, Dr. Will Keim, I want to be a speaker." And he said, "Yeah, you want to be away from your family for 150 days a year?" And they go, "No, I could never do that." And he said, "Then you don't want to be a speaker." I always remember, I've heard him say that so many times. What's some of those kinds of things you would say to people that are looking to break into the industry potentially?
Yeah, definitely that. I mean, it's like everything. Every job has its pluses and its minuses. The greatest things about being a professional speaker are also some of the most frustrating things, and some of the things that most people cannot handle. So if you are interested in becoming a speaker, there's a friend of mine, a guy named Grant Baldwin, who just wrote a great book called The Successful Speaker, who talks about it from a business standpoint. So it's got a lot of really great information in there. But I think the other side that you alluded to is also just from a personal standpoint. Are you okay without a safety net? I've always worked jobs in my life. I've always been drawn to jobs where my compensation was directly related to my competency and my hustle, those two things. I was a server in restaurants. I worked for a painting company that worked on what was called budget hours. So if I was a faster, more efficient painter, I got paid more hours than a person who was slow and not as good of a painter. So I've always been drawn to jobs where I was compensated because of the hustle and the competency and my ability to do those things. Whereas other people are only drawn to jobs where they feel safer. They know no matter what happens, they're going to have a paycheck. They show up and they put in their 6 hours of work within an 8-hour workday, or 4 hours of work within an 8-hour workday. And so that, I think, is figuring out which one of those two things you fall into really makes a huge difference in whether or not you're going to be successful as a speaker. Because we've met a lot of people who have said, "I want to do it," and they get started with it. And then that day comes when they might have to quit their full-time job in order to go into speaking full-time, and they just can't do it because they don't know where, I don't have anything booked past, I think I have one thing booked in 2021.
Right.
So for all I know, nobody's going to hire me for 2021. And I'll be like, "Okay, everybody. But that means I've got to constantly continue to evolve myself, and that hustle can just never stop."
Oh, no. They're going to book you. Some people listening are. If they wanted to, let me ask you a question. Where could they find you? Where do they go?
Well, thank you for asking, Curtis. How convenient of you. My website is Judson, Judson, LAIPPLY.com. They can find me there. Links to all of the Instagram and YouTube and all those other places and things like that. But
And just so you know, the only reason I ask you is because I don't recommend other speakers unless I've seen them. I know what quality they bring, and I know exactly that they're going to over deliver every single time, every single speech. They're going to leave it all on the floor. And so that's why I asked you, because I know that about you. And I know this isn't a hobby. This is what you do. You're all about impacting people's lives and organizations and individuals in a deep way. And that's what I love about you and why I so much appreciate what you bring. And I also know that the more really, really amazing speakers are out there on the circuit, the more the next year when it rolls around and they say, hey, we need to have a budget for a speaker, they're going to go, yeah, last year that person, she or he was amazing, so let's get another one. But if they go and they don't deliver, they'll go, why would we spend that kind of money? That person was horrible. Let's just have the CEO talk for 3 hours so we can all poke our eyeballs out with a sharp pencil. So that's why I want people like you to speak more, because people need to know about what you bring.
And I feel the same way about you, Curtis, and I agree. As we've seen the change in types of people speaking and influencer marketing and influencers becoming a thing, the mark of a professional versus somebody who just has an interesting story or people think might be a draw. I've seen videos, or I've seen news programs recently where they bring the TikTok stars out to talk to people in the public, and you can tell they don't know how to interact with people outside of a video camera. And so having a professional on stage, I think, is always going to trump having somebody who just might do it occasionally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one more thing, and that is, I would just say for you in your career and what you're doing, I know you're working on a new book. I know that you're working on a new speech and lots of different things. You're always evolving things. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with you over the next year and a half or so. What should we be looking for from Judson Laipply?
I am working on both a new keynote and a new book, which ironically, though, are actually different. The keynote will not be based on the book. So the new keynote that I've been working on, if you came and watched me speak right now, you would not know anything about the YouTube video, The Evolution of Dance, until the very end when I actually do the dance, because I still perform the dance at the end of every show. However, over time, I have learned a lot about viral videos, what makes videos go viral. And I've noticed that some of the same things that make videos go viral are some of the same things that make leaders good. They're some of the same things that allow leaders to create lasting change inside their organizations. And so I'm working on a keynote, and I've started compiling data and information that some of the same components that make a video go viral, authenticity, easily consumable, are some of the same things that allow leaders to create change inside their organizations. And the one big aspect of it that I really, really like, and I'm really interested as I get more and more into it, the difference between a viral moment and a viral movement. It's very easy for people who are leaders inside an area to pop in, get everyone excited for a little bit, and then move on. But the best leaders are the ones that somehow create a movement that actually creates change. And the biggest example that I used was a gentleman. A lot of people remember the Ice Bucket Challenge many years ago. But that individual, who unfortunately passed away, was able to start a movement that raised over $400 million for research that is, they believe, going to lead to the cure for Lou Gehrig's disease.
Wow, that's incredible.
Which is just incredible when you really think about it. So that is the one. And then the other one is a book that I'm working on that's called The Hustler's Guide to Happiness. And so it's kind of some of the same things that we've been talking about. The word hustle has become such a commonly used phrase, this idea of you got to hustle all the time and you got to constantly be working and you got to get ahead and you got to get ahead. And I do believe that to some aspect, but in the same, you got to be able to ask yourself, what am I hustling for? Why am I hustling so hard? And once you start having some levels of success and you start getting on a solid financial ground and a solid social ground, at what point does the hustle actually start to hurt some of those other areas? So we're just kind of exploring some of those concepts and some of those ideas as everybody chases something. Are the things that we're chasing going to make us better in the long run? Are they going to fulfill us to the level that we want to be fulfilled? Will we be happy over the scope of our life? Some of those kind of aspects. So
wow, I'm so excited hearing that. I can't wait to read them. I can't wait to hear more about it, hear the speech. And you just totally triggered me. I went back 15 years when I first met you, and here you are, this young, good-looking college student, full head of hair. It was crazy, and just rocking the world. And my question is this: tell us about you being locked in your room for a summer and digesting all things that are good for you, and all things of motivational speaking and Anthony Robbins. And you told me the story that I don't know if you were like grounded or you did something and your parents made you consume all this content, or they just did it all the time. But I think as a parent now, that resonates with me more than ever. Tell us, what made you be interested in being an inspirational speaker, Judd?
When I was in middle school, my parents were big fans of Zig Ziglar, and way back in the day. And one of the things that I had thought about it earlier when you were talking about we were talking about the like button and validity. Zig Ziglar had a book called How to Raise Positive Kids in a Negative World. And one of the things that he suggested that parents do is leave what they call I like notes for their children. Post-it notes, index cards, wherever, all around the house, and lunch things. And my parents used to write on a fairly regular basis, a couple times a week, I like Judson because, and then some of the reasons that they like me. So I was getting I likes as a kid. I was getting likes as a kid long before social media existed. Now, that doesn't mean I was a good kid. I still had my issues. I still had problems. And I got caught stealing when I was in 8th grade. And my parents put me in my room and played Zig Ziglar tapes. Now, they didn't lock the door. There's no child abuse of any sort. I just was grounded and then had to sit in my room and listen to Zig Ziglar tapes. I didn't like it. I thought it was stupid. I was in 8th grade. I'm 12 years old. I'm 13, however old you are in 8th grade. And I hated it. But somewhere along that line in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, between my parents listening to those things and the I likes and that stuff being in front of me a lot, I started to listen a little more. I started to actually hear what was being said. And some of those lessons became ingrained in me as a young adult. And I think those lessons, that started shaping my perception. I started seeing how my friends and the people around me were acting and viewing the world. And I started to realize that I had, in essence, a little bit of a leg up. For people who like to play video games, everyone's always looking for that thing inside a video game that gives you extra power or an extra weapon or just some sort of advantage. And for me at that age, it was some of these concepts and some of these ideas of personal responsibility, and you make your own luck, and all of those different things that came from the Anthony Robbins and the Mamie McCullens and the Zig Ziglars and the Og Mandino and the Norman Vincent Peale and the Napoleon Hill and all of those things. And I just remember watching another speaker and thinking to myself, that's exactly what I want to do.
Wow. That is an amazing story. And I think it's so, again, important for me as a parent to remember that all of that content you consumed is still available and in many different ways and interactive, and videos now with great speakers. And there's a great platform called Masterclass that I watch and listen to, and anyone that's interested in taking whatever it is they do to the next level, I highly recommend that. But you don't have to sign up for that specific one. If you're looking for great content, it's out there, and we need to share it with our kids more often, and our spouse, and anyone that we care about. And I appreciate you sharing today all of your insights and everything you bring. And again, anyone that's listening, that if you want to have a guaranteed standing ovation, somebody that's going to rock your world, you have to look up Judson Laipply. He's a great guy. Judson, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Keep living the dream, my brother.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Curtis. And I will keep living the dream. And I know you will keep living the dream as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. And of course, that leads us right into my favorite part of this podcast. It is time for the 24-hour challenge. Now, the 24-hour challenge this week is going to be some of Judson Laipply's amazing advice and some of the things he talked about. And that is this. It's great when you get a like on a video. It's great when you get a like on something social media that you posted. Remember, he had more likes and more views than anyone on the planet, but he still goes back to some of the most important likes he ever received as a person, and that was from his mom and dad. They would do a little post-it note, I like Judd because. And your challenge for the next 24 hours is to get 5 post-it notes, 5 little pieces of paper, and then give those to somebody, leave them somewhere they're going to see it, like on the mirror or in the refrigerator or under the coffee pot, and share what a real like in the real world really looks like. And I guarantee you're going to make their day, and you're going to be that much closer to living your dream. Hey everybody, I wanted to thank you so much for listening, and I have a workbook that is all about script writing. It's how to write a new script. It's normally $15 on my website. I want to offer it to you today for free. Just go to curtiszimmerman.com/new script, and you'll be able to download that as a free gift. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you keep listening to the next 24 hours.